The gunshot echoed across the abandoned harbor just as Alessandro De Luca threw himself between the trembling woman and the sniper's bullet. The impact slammed into the steel container behind them instead, sending sparks into the night. "Run!" he shouted. "I won't leave you!" The woman cried, grabbing his arm with shaking hands. "You have to." "No, not this time." Another shot cracked through the darkness. Alessandro spun, pulling her behind a stack of cargo crates while his bodyguards returned fire. The entire dock erupted into chaos. One of his men yelled, "Boss, there are too many of them!" Alessandro ignored him. His gray eyes never left the frightened face beside him. If she died tonight, nothing else mattered. The woman clutched his blood-stained jacket. "Why would you risk everything for me?" He looked at her as explosions echoed across the harbor. "Because you gave me my life back." Her eyes filled with tears. "You saved me long before I ever saved you." The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. The enemies were closing in. Alessandro tightened his grip on his pistol. "If we survive this," he whispered, "I'm finally going to tell you everything." Before either of them could move, a flash grenade exploded nearby. The screen of memory shattered. 7 months earlier, no one in Italy questioned Alessandro De Luca. Not politicians, not rival families, not billionaires. At 6'4", with broad shoulders, olive skin, and intricate black tattoos stretching across his arms, chest, neck, and back, he looked less like a businessman and more like the warning every parent gave their children. His enemies feared his silence more than other men's threats. His allies admired his discipline. The newspapers called him the Ghost King. Yet inside the towering mansion overlooking the Tuscan hills, the most powerful man in the underworld was quietly wasting away. Another untouched meal sat before him. The chef waited nervously. "I imported bluefin tuna from Japan this morning," he said carefully. "The vegetables came from a private farm outside Florence. I prepared everything exactly as requested." Alessandro picked up his fork. Every servant watched. His bodyguards stood like statues. He cut a tiny piece, raised it to his mouth, chewed once, then slowly placed the fork back on the table. "Take it away." The chef blinked. "Sir, perhaps I can prepare." "I said take it away." The room fell silent. The chef's face turned pale. "I'm sorry." Alessandro stood without another word. The expensive meal remained untouched. As he disappeared down the hallway, whispers immediately spread through the mansion. He barely ate again. That's almost nothing. How long has this been now? 7 months. Doctors had examined every organ. Nutritionists designed perfect meal plans. Psychologists searched for hidden trauma. The finest chefs in Europe had passed through the mansion's kitchens. Nothing worked. Every day Alessandro grew thinner. Every week his suits needed adjusting. Even his tattooed arms, once impossibly muscular, had begun to lose their strength. But he never complained. He simply stopped caring about food. Late that evening, after every servant had finished working, Rosa Bellini quietly entered the small kitchen reserved for household staff. Unlike the mansion's polished marble halls, this room smelled of fresh bread and old family recipes. Rosa loosened the apron tied around her waist and smiled to herself. She had always found peace in cooking. Her full, beautifully curvy figure moved confidently through the tiny kitchen as she hummed an old Italian lullaby her grandmother used to sing. She diced onions, crushed garlic, added tomatoes that had ripened naturally in the garden, fresh basil, a little cream. Nothing expensive, nothing complicated, just comfort. Another maid entered and laughed softly. "You're making soup after cleaning this entire mansion?" Rosa smiled. "My grandmother always said tired people deserve homemade food. You should have been a chef. I already have the happiest customer." "Oh? Myself?" The two women laughed together. Outside the kitchen, Alessandro walked the empty hallway, unable to sleep. For months, every night had been the same. Restlessness, silence, an emptiness no doctor could diagnose. Then, he stopped walking. Something drifted through the air. Tomatoes, fresh herbs, warm bread. His heartbeat quickened. He frowned. Why did that smell feel familiar? Without thinking, he followed it. Every step seemed automatic. His bodyguards exchanged confused glances as the feared Mafia boss ignored his private office and walked toward the servants' wing. Inside the kitchen, Rosa poured the soup into a simple ceramic bowl. She broke a piece of bread, closed her eyes, and whispered quietly, "Thank you, Nonna." The kitchen door suddenly opened. Every servant froze. Alessandro De Luca stood in the doorway. No one breathed. One maid accidentally dropped a spoon. The sound echoed through the room. Rosa's heart nearly stopped. She immediately lowered her head. "Boss, I'm sorry. We were only making dinner after work." Alessandro didn't answer. Instead, he looked directly at the bowl of soup. His voice came out almost as a whisper. "Who cooked that?" No one moved. Finally, Rosa raised her hand. "I did." He stepped closer. "What did you put in it?" She looked confused. "Tomatoes, basil, garlic, onions, cream, homemade bread. Anything else?" My grandmother always added a little patience. Several servants stared at the floor, terrified that she had just made a joke. To everyone's surprise, Alessandro's expression softened. Barely. "May I taste it?" The question shocked the room even more than if he had shouted. Rosa hesitated. "It's only servant food. I didn't ask whose food it was." She slowly handed him the spoon. Every eye remained fixed on him. He lifted the soup. The aroma reached him first, then the taste. The spoon froze halfway back to the bowl. His breathing changed. His eyes slowly closed. For one impossible moment, the mansion disappeared. He wasn't a feared Mafia boss. He was a little boy sitting beside his mother in a small country kitchen, watching her smile as rain tapped against the windows. When he finally opened his eyes again, they glistened with emotion he hadn't allowed anyone to see in decades. Quietly, he took another spoonful, then another. No one dared interrupt the silence. By the time he lowered the bowl, not a single drop remained. Rosa stared in disbelief. The bodyguards looked at each other, speechless. One whispered under his breath, He finished it." Alessandro looked at Rosa for a long moment before speaking. Then he asked a question that made every person in the kitchen wonder whether their lives were about to change forever. "Who taught you that recipe?" Alessandro's question lingered in the kitchen like the last note of a haunting melody. Rosa blinked, still holding the empty bowl. "My grandmother," she answered softly. "She raised me after my parents died. She never wrote recipes down. She said food should be remembered by the heart, not by paper." Alessandro's fingers tightened around the spoon. What was her name? Lucia Bellini. For a split second, something flashed across his face. Recognition, shock, maybe even fear. But it disappeared just as quickly. "Thank you," he said quietly, before turning toward the door. The servants remained frozen until he disappeared down the hallway. Only then did everyone begin talking at once. Did that really happen? He actually ate? "I've never seen him finish anything." Rosa looked down at the empty bowl, unable to understand why such a simple meal had affected the most feared man in Italy. The next morning, the mansion buzzed with rumors. By breakfast, every servant had heard a different version of the story. Some claimed the boss had finally recovered. Others believed the soup contained some secret ingredient. The head chef, Enzo, refused to believe any of it. "It was luck," he muttered, while angrily slicing vegetables. "One bowl doesn't mean anything." Before anyone could respond, the mansion's chief of security entered the kitchen. His deep voice silenced the room. Rosa Bellini. She looked up nervously. The boss wants breakfast. The room fell silent again. Enzo folded his arms. Good. Tell him I'll prepare something worthy of him. The guard shook his head. He specifically asked for Rosa. Enzo's face darkened. That's impossible. I don't repeat orders. Every eye turned toward Rosa. She swallowed hard. I've never cooked for someone like him. The guard gave a rare smile. He already knows. A few minutes later, Rosa entered the enormous private kitchen reserved for Alessandro's meals. Everything sparkled. Marble countertops. Imported cookware. Ingredients worth thousands of euros. She suddenly felt completely out of place. Alessandro entered moments later, dressed in a black tailored suit that barely concealed the colorful tattoos climbing his neck before disappearing beneath his collar. His expression remained serious. You look nervous. I am. Good. She looked confused. People who aren't nervous usually stop caring. For the first time, she noticed how tired he looked. Dark circles rested beneath his eyes. His face carried a sadness no amount of wealth could hide. What would you like me to make? She asked. He surprised her. What would you make if I weren't your employer? She smiled. My grandmother always said breakfast should give people hope. So, I'd make fresh focaccia, scrambled eggs with herbs, roasted tomatoes, and warm chamomile tea. No truffles? She laughed softly. No. Caviar? No. Gold-covered pastries? She couldn't help smiling. Definitely not. He nodded once. Then make breakfast. Half an hour later, the aroma filled the dining room. Unlike every expensive meal prepared before, this one looked simple, warm, honest. Alessandro took a bite. Then another. Without speaking, he finished every bite. The staff watched from the doorway in complete disbelief. One elderly butler quietly wiped tears from his eyes. I haven't seen him eat breakfast in years. News spread through the mansion within minutes. By lunchtime, even the gardeners knew. By sunset, whispers had reached people outside the estate. Something had changed. Over the next 2 weeks, Rosa cooked every meal. She refused to create expensive dishes simply because the ingredients were available. Instead, she prepared recipes filled with memories: fresh bread, vegetable stews, chicken roasted with rosemary, creamy risotto, simple desserts. Each meal brought a little more color back into Alessandro's face. He even started walking through the gardens again. One afternoon, Rosa found him standing beside a fountain, staring at the water. You skip dessert, she teased gently. I've never liked sweets. She folded her arms. That's not what the butler said. He looked at her. He talks too much. He said your mother baked almond cakes every Sunday. Silence. You shouldn't listen to gossip. I wasn't. She held up a small container. I baked one anyway. He sighed dramatically. You don't give up, do you? No. You realize I'm supposed to be intimidating. She smiled. You are. And yet someone still has to remind you to eat. For the first time in many years, Alessandro laughed. A real laugh. Not loud, not forced, just genuine. The sound startled several guards nearby. One whispered, Did the boss just laugh? I think he did. I didn't know he could. That evening, Alessandro walked into the mansion library, carrying 2 cups of tea. Rosa looked surprised. You made tea? I'm trying. She took a sip. It's terrible. He smirked. I know. She laughed. I'll teach you. You'll have to. They sat across from one another in comfortable silence. Finally, Alessandro spoke. When I was 8 years old, my mother made tomato soup every time it rained. Rosa listened quietly. She said storms always ended eventually. His voice grew softer. One afternoon, she never came home. Rosa's heart sank. What happened? She died in a car explosion. She covered her mouth. I'm so sorry. They called it an accident. You don't believe that? No. The room became unbearably quiet. I think someone murdered her. Rosa stared at him. I've spent 30 years looking for the truth. And the soup? He looked into his untouched tea. After she died, food stopped tasting like food. You still ate, only enough to survive. And 7 months ago? He hesitated. My doctor said my body was healthy. So why couldn't you eat? He met her eyes. Because grief finally caught up with me. Before Rosa could answer, shouting erupted downstairs. One of the guards burst into the library without knocking. Boss! Alessandro stood instantly. What happened? We caught someone trying to climb the outer wall. Who is it? We don't know. The guard hesitated. But he wasn't trying to break into your office. Alessandro's expression hardened. Then where? The guard looked toward Rosa. He was trying to reach the servants' quarters. The room fell silent. Rosa felt a chill run down her spine. Mine, she whispered. The guard nodded. We searched him. What did you find? Alessandro asked. The guard slowly placed a photograph on the table. It was a picture of Rosa, taken only 3 days earlier. Someone had been watching her. Alessandro's eyes turned ice cold. His voice dropped to the terrifying calm that had made powerful men fear him for years. No one touches what's under my protection. Rosa looked at the photograph, then back at Alessandro. She had entered the mansion believing she was just another maid. Now someone outside those walls wanted her badly enough to risk sneaking into the estate. She whispered the only question that mattered. But why me? The question hung in the library, unanswered. But why me? Alessandro's eyes remained fixed on the photograph. I don't know, he admitted. And that worries me more than if I did. He handed the picture to Marco, the head of security. Find out who took this. We already questioned the intruder, Marco replied. And? He refused to speak. Alessandro buttoned his jacket. I'll ask him myself. Rosa reached out instinctively. Please, don't hurt him because of me. He looked down at her hand, resting lightly on his sleeve. You still believe everyone deserves mercy. My grandmother taught me that anger spreads faster than kindness. And if kindness fails, then at least you know you didn't become the thing you were fighting. For a brief moment, Alessandro was silent. Those words reminded him painfully of someone else, his mother. The intruder sat tied to a chair in a secure room beneath the mansion. His face was bruised from the struggle during his capture, but he wore a smug smile. Alessandro entered alone. The guards closed the heavy steel door behind him. The prisoner chuckled. So the Ghost King finally came. Alessandro remained standing. Who hired you? No one. You climbed the walls of my estate carrying a photograph of my maid. I like photography. Alessandro's expression never changed. You have one chance to tell me the truth. The prisoner laughed louder. You've grown soft. Silence. I've heard stories. The man continued. They say all it took was one curvy little maid with homemade soup to turn the mighty Alessandro De Luca into a family man. The insult echoed through the room. Alessandro calmly removed his watch and placed it on the table. I asked you a question. The prisoner leaned forward. You really don't know who she is, do you? That sentence struck harder than any punch. What are you talking about? The smile disappeared from the prisoner's face. The woman you're protecting isn't just a maid. Alessandro took one slow step closer. Explain. Ask the old women in the village where she grew up. Who sent you? I can't tell you. You won't. The man swallowed. They'll kill my family. Before Alessandro could press further, the prisoner suddenly gasped. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. Marco burst into the room. Boss. The prisoner convulsed violently before collapsing. Marco checked for a pulse. His face hardened. He's dead. What happened? Marco opened the man's mouth. Hidden beneath one of his back teeth was a shattered poison capsule. He killed himself. Alessandro stared at the lifeless body. Someone powerful had wanted the truth buried forever. That night, Rosa couldn't sleep. The photograph kept replaying in her mind. Someone had watched her. Someone had followed her. A gentle knock came at her bedroom door. "It's me," Alessandro said. She opened it. He stood outside, carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate. She smiled faintly. "I thought mafia bosses only drank whiskey. I discovered I prefer this." She laughed softly. "Come in." They sat by the window overlooking the moonlit vineyards. Neither spoke for several minutes. Finally, Rosa broke the silence. "Am I in danger?" He answered honestly. "Yes." She nodded. "Thank you for telling me the truth. I promised myself I'd never lie to you." She looked at him carefully. "Why?" He searched for an answer. Because she made him laugh. Because she made the mansion feel like a home instead of a fortress. Because every meal she cooked reminded him that life could still be gentle. Instead, he simply said, "Because you've become important to me." A tear rolled down her cheek. "No one's ever said that to me before." He frowned. "That's impossible." "It isn't." She smiled sadly. "When people looked at me, they noticed my size before they noticed me." Alessandro shook his head. "I noticed your courage." She looked away. "I was always the funny friend, the reliable friend. The woman everyone said would make someone a wonderful wife someday. But never today." She nodded. "I learned to smile anyway." Alessandro reached across the small table and gently took her hand. "The people who overlooked you were blind." She looked into his eyes. "And what do you see?" He answered without hesitation. "I see the strongest person in this house." The following afternoon, Marco returned from the village, carrying an old wooden box. "I found someone who remembered Rosa's grandmother." Rosa looked surprised. "You went to my hometown?" There was something there. Marco carefully opened the box. Inside were faded photographs, letters, a silver necklace, an old recipe book. Rosa immediately recognized the handwriting. "Nonna!" Marco lifted a yellowed envelope. It was addressed to Lucia Bellini, "the woman who raised me." It was never delivered. Alessandro carefully unfolded the fragile paper. As he read, the color drained from his face. "What is it?" Rosa asked. He handed her the letter. The signature at the bottom stole her breath. Isabella De Luca, Alessandro's mother. The letter read, "Lucia, thank you for protecting the child. I pray the day never comes when my enemies discover what we have done. If anything happens to me, promise me Rosa will grow up far away from this life. Tell her only that she was loved from the moment she entered our home." Rosa's hands began shaking. I don't understand." Neither did Alessandro. Marco looked equally stunned. "Boss." Alessandro slowly sat down. "My mother knew your grandmother," Rosa whispered. She said, "protecting the child." Silence filled the room. Marco turned another page inside the recipe book. Something slipped onto the floor. A birth certificate. Everyone stared. The document was partially burned, but one line remained perfectly readable. "Father, unknown mother, Sofia Bellini." Attached to the certificate was another folded note. This one was written by Lucia herself. "If Rosa ever learns the truth, tell her none of this was her fault. Some secrets were buried to keep her alive." Rosa looked as though the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. What truth? Before anyone could answer, every phone in the mansion began ringing at once. Marco answered first. His face turned pale. "Boss, what is it?" "Our northern warehouses. What about them?" "They're under attack." Another guard rushed into the room. "And that's not all." He looked directly at Rosa. "A man claiming to lead the Romano family just called." Alessandro's jaw tightened. "What did he say?" The guard swallowed hard. "He said." He hesitated before repeating the chilling message. Return the girl your mother stole from us 30 years ago, or every person inside this mansion dies. Rosa felt the letter slip from her trembling fingers. The room fell into a silence so heavy that even the ticking of the antique clock sounded deafening. Marco looked from Alessandro to Rosa. What does he mean by the girl your mother stole? Alessandro slowly folded the letter and placed it back inside the wooden box. My mother never stole children. His voice was calm, but everyone in the room knew that calmness meant a storm was coming. The phone rang again. Alessandro answered without taking his eyes off Rosa. This is Alessandro. A low voice laughed on the other end. I wondered how long it would take you to connect the pieces. Who is this? You already know. The Romano family was destroyed years ago. We survived. Alessandro's expression hardened. What do you want? Our daughter. He looked toward Rosa. You're lying. Am I? Ask yourself why your mother hid her. Ask yourself why Lucia Bellini raised her. Ask yourself why we've searched for her for 30 years. The line went dead. Rosa slowly backed away. I don't understand any of this. You don't have to right now, Alessandro said gently. But I do. Her voice cracked. My whole life, I thought I knew who I was. She looked at the birth certificate again. Now I don't even know if my name is really mine. Alessandro walked toward her. You are Rosa. But who are my parents? We'll find the truth. And if the truth changes everything? He cupped her face with both hands. It won't change who you've become. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I've never been more frightened. You won't face this alone. For the first time in years, Alessandro embraced someone without hesitation. She buried her face against his chest, where the intricate tattoos disappeared beneath his open shirt. The powerful Mafia boss who had terrified countless enemies stood perfectly still, holding the woman who had unknowingly become the center of his world. By dawn, every entrance to the estate was heavily guarded. Marco spread maps across the conference table. The Romano family controls the eastern coast again. I thought they were finished, another captain said. So did everyone else. Alessandro studied the map. They're not after territory. They're after Rosa. Marco nodded. They've waited 30 years. One elderly advisor cleared his throat. Boss, yes, what if giving her back prevents a war? The room became deathly quiet. Alessandro looked at the man with icy eyes. She isn't a package. No, boss, but she isn't negotiable. The advisor lowered his head. I'm sorry. Alessandro's voice softened only slightly. Anyone who threatens her threatens this family. Every man around the table nodded, without another word. That afternoon, Rosa entered the mansion chapel. She needed silence. Questions crowded her mind. She sat alone in the front pew. I wish you were here, Nana, she whispered. You always knew what to say. A familiar voice answered behind her. She'd tell you to keep your heart steady. She turned. It was the elderly village woman Marco had spoken to. I came as quickly as I could. You knew my grandmother. We were best friends. Rosa hurried to her. Please, tell me the truth. The old woman gently took her hands. 30 years ago, two rival Mafia families went to war. Rosa listened through tears. Your parents wanted to leave that life forever. They planned to disappear with you. What happened? They never made it. Rosa's heart pounded. They were ambushed. She closed her eyes. They died. The old woman nodded sadly. Your mother managed to hand you to Isabella De Luca before she took her last breath. Rosa looked stunned. Alessandro's mother. She promised to protect you. But why didn't she keep me? Because everyone knew Isabella. They would have searched her home first. So she asked Lucia Bellini to raise you as her own granddaughter. The old woman smiled through tears. Lucia loved you from the first moment she held you. Rosa sobbed quietly. So, I wasn't abandoned. No, I was protected. Every single day. When Alessandro found Rosa in the gardens later that evening, she was sitting beneath an olive tree. He sat beside her. "I know everything." He nodded. "I'm sorry you had to learn it this way." She looked at him. "Your mother saved my life. She'd have been happy to know the woman you became." Rosa smiled sadly. "I wish I could thank her. You already have." "How?" "You brought her recipes back into this house." A gentle breeze carried the scent of rosemary through the garden. For the first time since the truth had surfaced, Rosa smiled without forcing it. Their peace lasted only minutes. An explosion thundered through the front gates. Smoke filled the evening sky. Marco's voice echoed across the courtyard. "They're here!" Gunfire erupted. The Romano family had come. Alessandro immediately pulled Rosa behind a stone wall. "Stay with Marco." "No, Rosa, I'm not leaving you." He smiled, despite the chaos. "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met. I learned from you." Another explosion shook the estate. Dozens of armed men flooded through the broken entrance. Alessandro stepped forward. Weapons were raised on both sides. Then an older man emerged from the attackers. His gray hair framed a face worn by decades of grief. He looked directly at Rosa. Tears filled his eyes. "My granddaughter." Everyone froze. Rosa stared in disbelief. "My grandfather?" The old man slowly lowered his weapon. "I searched half my life for you." She looked at Alessandro. Neither of them knew what to believe. The old man spoke again. "I never wanted this war." "Then why bring guns?" Alessandro asked. "Because I knew you would never trust words alone." He reached into his coat very slowly and removed an old photograph. It showed Rosa as a baby in her mother's arms. Beside them stood the old man. "I came to bring my family home." Rosa walked forward cautiously. Alessandro instinctively reached for her hand. She squeezed it gently before continuing. The old man smiled sadly. "I understand if you hate me. I don't know you," Rosa answered honestly. "Then let me earn the chance." She studied his face. She saw sorrow, regret, not hatred. She looked back at Alessandro. "What should I do?" He answered without hesitation. "Whatever your heart tells you." She took a deep breath. "My family isn't defined by blood alone." The old man's eyes glistened. "The woman who raised me is my grandmother. The woman who saved me is also my family." She turned toward Alessandro. "And the people who stood beside me when I knew nothing, they're my family too." The old man slowly nodded. "Your mother would have said the same." He extended his hand. "May we begin again." Rosa stepped forward and embraced him. The years of hatred seemed to melt away in a single moment. The armed men on both sides slowly lowered their weapons. Alessandro looked around the courtyard. So much death, because no one chose forgiveness. The old man sighed. It's time that changed. Months later, the mansion no longer felt cold. The grand dining hall, once silent and intimidating, was filled with conversation and laughter. Servants, guards, advisors, and guests shared one long table. There were no separate meals. No one ate alone. At the center sat Alessandro and Rosa. She had opened a community kitchen on the estate, serving homemade meals to families struggling across the region. People traveled for miles, not because the food was expensive, but because it reminded them of home. One afternoon, a young reporter asked Alessandro, "People say the most feared mafia boss in Italy changed because of one bowl of soup. Is that really true?" Alessandro looked at Rosa before answering. "No." The reporter blinked. "No?" He smiled warmly. "It wasn't the soup. It was the woman who served it with kindness." Rosa laughed softly and reached for his hand beneath the table. He squeezed it gently. The mansion that had once echoed with fear now echoed with hope, proving that even the hardest hearts can be restored, not by power or wealth, but by compassion, courage, and the simple act of caring for another human being.